Hey everybody, it is TJ at 7 o'clock on Thursday. I let everybody know on my Facebook, my personal profile today, that it is the month of TJ, globally celebrated on July 9th. But if y'all want to get me something special a little bit early, I would love that, which is basically invite your friends to go to boldcreativecollective.com and put their email address in to get a little gift from me on my birthday month. And also to like the Facebook group boldcreativescollective.com, where you all are watching this show of TJ tonight. I'm really happy to be back with you all. I took a week off with my family down the beach, and so we didn't have anything for the past week or two. But I'm really excited to be back with you all tonight and bring along with me Michael Kalmbach from Wilmington, Delaware. And this is really special to me because, as many of you know, in my other life, I am a therapist, a psychotherapist, and my passion, which is why I started Bold Creatives Collective, and my coaching side of things, is to bring people through their journey of life by using artistic and creative mediums. And Michael is the founding director of the Creative Vision Factory in Wilmington, where it's a community-led nonprofit organization where they, I believe, seek to help people along in their journey through the use of art and other creative means to better their lives and their mental and behavioral health. And so I'm really excited to talk to Michael about that, and also about what he sees as being important for all of us as creative people to do in order to nurture our mental health, our behavioral health, and also hear a little bit about his story and how he did and does that. So as usual, this broadcast, this live, is being recorded, so you can bounce in and out. I know many of you do that. You don't stay for the whole thing, but you catch it later, and that's totally cool. This will live in the timeline of the group for a little while, and then it'll go someplace else, and you'll have access to it wherever it lives from that point on. But anyway, that's enough about all of that. I'm going to bring Michael in right now, and we're going to start the conversation, and we'll see where it goes. So I'm going to click the button, and he should show up. Hey, Michael, how are you?
I'm doing well, TJ. How are you?
Awesome. It's so good to meet you. I've been following you along on Facebook. One of the things that many people know about me is that I'm kind of creepy, in that I identify people that are doing really awesome things in the world. And I like to learn just by kind of lurking in the background what they're up to. And you're one of those people. We have some associations because I am kind of tangentially associated with the Wilmington art scene through some of my friends, but I'm much more connected to Philly. So I've known about your work for a little while, but it's really cool to actually get to talk with you and learn a little bit more from the man instead of his Facebook profile and his talks online. So thanks for being willing to give up some of your night.
Yeah, no problem. I likewise kind of noticed that our Venn diagram of contacts overlaps, and unfortunately, Wilmington needs to be more of a part of the Philadelphia art community.
It really does.
Yeah, but we have a structural deficit there in that our city government continues to think that it's okay to run our art loop on First Friday. So,
right.
It's been a crusade of mine for a while to try to get them to move it to Second Friday.
Right. I mean, wouldn't that be just, logical?
Would be. And so the great thing about Wilmington and Delaware is it's just a matter of time. You just have to wait, and your best friend will eventually be mayor, and then you'll be able to just do whatever you want to do. So
yeah.
Until then, though, some friends of mine are organizing a alternative art loop this fall.
Awesome. Okay.
For September and October, we'll be doing events on the last Friday of the month. And we're calling the event Last is First.
Last is First. That's awesome. I love it.
So we'll be stay tuned for that. We're going to be highlighting alternative venues, bringing art loop like events into districts that historically have not had art events.
That's awesome.
And this past year too, we a group of friends of mine, we successfully advocated and got the Division of the Arts to accept hip hop as a funding category within our funding.
Get out. That is really cool.
And so we're planning to also have highlighting local hip hop artists as a part of our last is first after parties. So
that's awesome. There's gonna be after parties too in this whole thing.
Oh yeah.
That's all. See, I love, my wife is from Wilmington. She's from North Wilmington, and ever since I've been, hanging around her, I've just really have realized how closely related everybody is in Wilmington. Like all of a sudden, these, or in Delaware in general, all these people start talking about these other people. And you're right. I think when you say, if you just wait around long enough, your friend will become mayor or governor, and
Yeah.
you'll all of a sudden have their ear. But you've been involved with the state of Delaware and the city of Wilmington in all different kinds of ways for a really long time. And so can you talk to us a little bit about, your history there and how you came to be the founding director of what is called the Creative Vision Factory? I know, you got your MFA from Delaware in 2008, right? And so is that where it started for you in Delaware? Or, why don't you talk and I'll stop?
Yeah, I would say, that's definitely where it started for me in Delaware. Well, I would even put it back a little further. My wife and I, we taught together in Virginia for 3 years right after graduating from undergrad. And so
Okay.
in 2003, I graduated from Bloomsburg University after my second senior year. My second senior year was due to the fact that my first senior year ended with me at checking into White Deer Run in Allenwood
Okay.
for rehab
Okay.
for heroin addiction, and so my second senior year was my first year in recovery.
Wow. Okay.
And so I completed my sobriety date's April 13th, and I graduated from Bloomsburg, got my my first year shortly thereafter, right before I graduated, and then
Right.
fall, my wife and I, who was then my girlfriend, we ended up teaching together in Westmoreland County, Virginia, at a
Okay.
school called Washington and Lee High School. But
Okay.
what's wild to me is I had absolutely no plan other than maybe possibly moving to Philadelphia to hang out with some other friends of mine who lived there, and
Okay.
I had no plans whatsoever. I knew I wanted to teach. I was thinking about graduate school, and but for me, I was really, really in love with Rebecca, and was going to follow her wherever she went. My
Yeah.
grandfather actually told me follow her, to be her page turner wherever she goes.
Yep. Yep.
So she ended up getting this job teaching French at Washington Lee High School, and I was working for my father at his campground in Maine that summer.
Okay.
And I was able to get a transfer to a campground in Williamsburg, Virginia, that was in the same chain of campgrounds that my father managed for forever. And while I was down there, I got to meet people at the school that Rebecca was teaching at, and we met this amazing. They had an amazing art teacher there, a man named Michael Faulkner.
Okay.
And Michael, he was like a character straight out of a Christopher Guest movie.
Okay.
He he and his family are owners of a kennel called Woods Point Kennel that breeds champion golden retrievers.
Okay.
And Michael, in addition to teaching art at this very rural Virginia school, was also rehabbing a historic home in the area,
Gotcha.
um, and also it often judges sporting breeds at the Westminster Dog Show.
No, that's awesome.
Like getting to meet him, I
Yep.
was like at like a faculty party. He then, uh, you know, it was probably like in October of that fall. I'm just getting comfortable working at this new campground and kind of,
Right, right, right.
thinking, I really don't have much any plans whatsoever. And here, Michael said to Rebecca, "Hey, nobody knows this yet, but I've been offered a really good job at this Bill Gates Maya Angelou charter school in DC.
Okay.
I'm gonna take it, and I'm so concerned that they're not gonna be able to find an art teacher here. It's a really rural school and
Right.
nowhere." And he said to Rebecca, "Do you think Michael would be interested?" And she was like, "Well, his mother's a teacher. I think that he's maybe got the chops for it. I think he would."
Okay.
And so I put my materials together and I applied for the job the day that Michael Faulkner resigned or put in his notice.
Notice, right.
I then got to shadow this guy in his classroom, basically from like the time period of like Thanksgiving break to Christmas break. And then I took over the classroom
Just rolled right into it.
here. Yeah. And what was so cool about that experience is that, for me, the high school art room was always like a sanctuary.
Mhm.
And I had a really great teacher when I was in high school, a guy named John Minnick, who uh, he um, he taught my aunts and uncle and knew our
Wow.
family, was friends with our family, and
Wow.
I had the luxury of not only having him as a high school art teacher, he was also my junior high art teacher, and then he transitioned to the high school with me. Like it just so happened to work
So
like
he just followed you all the way along and
all the way through. And the great benefit of Mr. Minnick is that if you had any kind of self direction, or if you're a worker, he'd basically just give you the space to work.
that's
And he
awesome.
would always kind of drop in on me with some suggestions, things I should
Right,
look up, things like that. But I never needed anybody to like get me moving.
right.
And so for me, when like years later, when I find myself in this high school art room with Michael Faulkner, like it was really clear to me that Michael Faulkner was also like a Jedi, much like John Minnick.
Yeah.
He just had a touch with kids, and
Mm.
it became really clear that his room was a safe space for people.
Yep.
And for me, I was thrilled to get this job. Right off the bat, though, I knew I was gonna try to leverage it for grad school. So
Yeah.
get paid for 3 years. I was hired on an emergency hire, and I got a temporary license from Virginia to teach
Over
3 years. You know, Sometimes when it's really rough, I kick myself in the ass. Like, why did I not get that education degree? Why didn't I not
right,
look back on that?
right. Because your undergrad degree is an art as well, right? It's a
Studio art,
fine
right?
arts degree. Okay.
Studio art, and so, but yeah, it was a real gift to be able to kind of have a crash course in student teaching from a gifted instructor like Michael Faulkner. I
Mhm.
even he even during that break when I was like shadowing him, my first like official substituting duty was covering his room while he was actually judging the Westminster Dog Show. Uh,
That's so crazy.
And so I ended up taking over this art room, but it became so clear to me being on the other side of the desk
Right,
that there was something more to the room. It's like I
right.
always wanted to be, I always had a goal to be a really, really serious artist.
Yep.
I remember, and that goes back to Mr. Minnick as well. I remember being in seventh grade, making something. I had this kid right next to me in class, Clint Iller. And Clint looked at my drawing. He's like, Michael, you should be an artist. Mr. Minnick was standing behind us and said, Clint, he already is.
Wow.
For
Yeah.
me, that was just like, okay, like I guess that's what I'm gonna be.
That's what you are. It, like, solidified your identity right there,
Big time.
that comment. Yeah.
I really didn't have any other kind of path other than that. From that point forward, I knew that I wanted to, pursue the arts and do that. And you know, being in that being in the classroom for the first time, though, I started direct and not only just being in the classroom, but also just really being a year clean and sober, and then
Right.
all of a sudden being in charge of like 5 art classes and a black and white photography class and
Oh
kids
my god, man, they just, like, threw you in. Yeah.
big time. And I'm not really, that much older than these kids at this point in time,
Right,
and
right.
I felt like, it was just a real trip for me because I felt like really it felt like I had the opportunity to do it over.
Yeah,
I was like going back to high school.
yeah.
What would have happened to me in my work if I had never had this kind of like sidetrack in drugs and alcohol is what I
Mhm.
felt like early on. But one of the things that was really cool is that, most of the students, that's where it made me realize that my recovery history and just my time in art rooms just gave me this kind of like superpower that I could like sniff some stuff out. Most of the
Right.
times like kids were having some problems, you could trace it back to drugs and alcohol and two, just having a kind of an
Mhm.
upbringing where I was around a lot of chaos and
Were you? Okay.
my mom got clean and sober when I was in second grade, but
Okay.
I was in the car with her when she had a pretty significant DUI crash that kind of got her
Wow.
in the rooms and got her cleaned up.
Right.
And also too, what's interesting, her story is like about a year after that, she ended up getting a job teaching at the school that I was going to. And so I feel like education and being a teacher is definitely that was the model that I had.
Yeah.
And
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just, like, listening, and I think, my story is very different than your story. We all have, obviously, different stories, but, this what I'm hearing about, like, your experience in the art class, both as, like, a kid and a student and then ultimately a teacher is, like, so similar to mine in that, like, I can also name my art teachers from middle school and high school, some of whom are part of this Facebook group now that I've created and this whole thing that I'm trying to grow, and they're trying to help me along with that. But so my high school art teacher, my undergrad professors, at the University of the Arts, like, I credit these people with, in so many ways, saving my life in multiple times, multiple iterations. I didn't have, I don't have a history of substance use in the way that you do, but my thing was eating disorder,
Mhm,
and the intuitive nature of these art educators, both at the high school level and the undergrad level, for me, um, they picked up on stuff about me, like without. While I thought I was all like stealth and everything, like going under the radar,
mhm,
um, but the power of the art room, um, especially as a kid, as a high school student, I'm hearing like, very similar theme between you and I, to, like, coax us out, to, like, give us a sense of identity,
mhm,
um, that we can hold on to no matter what happens,
mhm,
right, in our life. We can always come back to it, and then to be able to, like you're talking about, get into the classroom and start to, like, do the same thing for people on the other side of the desk, which is really amazing. So you were in Virginia then teaching for how long?
for 3 years. And during that 3 years, I was starting to position myself for graduate school.
Yep.
I was thinking about doing some research for MFA programs, and that's what for me it felt like like going back to high school and then reapplying. I ended up going to Bloomsburg University because that's where my father grew up, and I used
Yeah.
to like going there like when I would go visit and go to the Bloomsburg Fair. I wasn't
Uh-huh.
doing like intense research on like their
Yeah.
department and who's there, or I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to position myself for schools, even though like what's funny is like even though I mean I had great grades in high school, I was like captain of my hockey team, I had all this stuff going for me, but I didn't have anybody coaching me along of how to position
Like
myself
what to
out.
do. Yeah. Right.
And so I felt like I really lucked out in that the art department at Bloomsburg was incredible. And I had like this really like small scale art department where I had a ton of, you know, I just had the entire faculty in my
Yeah.
pocket. It was awesome. But I was positioning myself for graduate school in the summer of 2005. I got accepted to the Virginia Commonwealth University's summer studio program.
Okay.
And all of us that were in that program were all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to like leverage this program to get into VCU.
Right.
And once we get there, we then realize that like, nobody gets into VCU through this program.
Right.
But it runs 8 weeks. And the head of the painting department at the time, Richard Roth, who was one of the leading faculty members there that turned it into the department that it was.
Right.
We had Richard. Like it was pretty cool to have this kind of access, and
Yeah.
he described it to us right off the bat. He's like, this program is kind of turned into like a little mini MFA program, and you guys should be ready.
To apply something.
Get on running once you get started. It's like the first month feels like the first year, and the second month feels like year two. Like, and every week we would have a guest artist come in, do a studio visit, and then we'd have Richard do a studio visit with us, and we'd have somebody from sculpture do a studio visit with us. There's like 10 painters and 10 sculptors.
Okay.
I'm still friends with a lot of the people I was in that cohort with.
Okay.
And then too, the same with a lot of the faculty. I'm still in touch with a lot of them, and it was a great experience. And so I ended up applying to 8 programs and got into the University of Delaware, University of Cincinnati, and
Okay.
Madison University. At this point, I was really like technical about how I was applying, because I only applied to, I got rejected from Hunter College twice. Like right out of undergrad, I only applied to the Hunter MFA program because a guest artist at Bloomsburg was like, you should apply there.
Right. And they kicked you out twice. They declined you twice.
Yes. And then so like some of the top programs obviously didn't get into some of those top programs. But Rebecca and I, when she was first going around doing interviews for her teaching position, which ultimately landed her in Virginia, we came by Newark, Delaware, where the University of Delaware is, and
Yeah.
I was driving her to an interview she had at a high school in Maryland.
Okay.
The principal there told us to go check out Newark. A lot of teachers live over there, and that's what like kind of like planted the seed of Delaware for me. And we just kind of fell in love with just how quaint the town looked.
Yeah.
And when I did start doing some research about their program, I was like, well, hey, like this is like a really well-funded MFA program.
Right.
And there's, if I get in, it'll be a tuition waiver and a stipend. And
yeah,
it's on
it's like starting to make sense. Yeah.
Like this could work. And, when I finally came to get my to come see the campus, I knew as soon as I got here that this was going to be the place. I had just interviewed and actually like University of Cincinnati actually flew me there as a part of like my acceptance package. And I was part of this like recruitment weekend.
Okay.
And it was wild. Like I was just like, for me, it was just like, it felt so nice to be like chosen and to be treated like really well. I was just like, yeah, I'm going there.
Right. Right. Oh yeah.
The whole time I was there though, I was thinking, man, Rebecca is going to hate Cincinnati.
Hate it. And your grandfather said you better not leave her, right? So
yep.
Right.
And so I knew Delaware would be the better choice, and it seemed closer to our family, and it's really worked out. But a faculty member here, Bob Straight, who started in our art department in 1980.
Okay.
He was it's like trips me out because I was born in 1980. I was teaching brain then. And he just had such a great touch, and he just has he's so kind. And as soon as I like got on this tour with him, I just knew that, hey, if I get to work with this guy and other faculty and have it fully funded, what could go wrong?
Right.
So that was the slam dunk to come here. But the whole time here, working on my MFA, what was wild is that as much as I was excited to start graduate school, the transition from being a high school art teacher to then being in grad school was, well, I loved it. I mean, it was just amazing to kind of be in graduate school and just be working in studio, doing all the research. But I really missed the energy of like a room where I felt like I had like 120 people to collaborate with,
Right.
amidst the energy of just like the jokes, the cutting up, the,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and one of the things that I did, my
Goes from community to really solitary really quickly.
big time, yeah, and it's like
Right.
I needed that kind of like itch, and that the spring of my first year of graduate school, I ended up getting back into a practice where I was customizing sneakers, and it was based off of like my most popular lesson when I was teaching high school art in Virginia. I had a student in my class, Monte Motley, who would come in every day with some new shirt that he designed, new sneakers he designed, but he wouldn't do any work.
Nothing else. It was just
And so I finally said to him, I was like, Monte, like most of us, we go through these classes to try to figure out what our practice is. You already have it figured out. So how about you like come in and like you just use the art room as like your shop time. You just do whatever you want,
right.
and then I'll figure out a way to grade you. And so I kind of like just off a whim, like drew a template of a blank Air Force Nike Air Force One and took it to the copy machine, made a bunch of copies, and told him I was like, you know what, you owe me 20 designs, and I'll make up for all your late work.
Mhm.
What ended up happening is that somehow got twisted in the school that if you submit your designs to Mr. K, he'll get Nike to make them for you. And it's just like all of a sudden I started having like a bunch of kids, not even in my room, submitting designs to me,
Design.
copies and doing that kind of thing. And so I set about to make a series. I thought to myself, you know what? I should teach myself how to customize these sneakers. And I'm going to make a whole line of shoes that all violate school dress code. And then I'll like create a lesson out of it. And then
Uh,
all the students will have to like have some sort of like social critique embedded into their shoe design. It has to say something. But as soon as I had as soon as I brought in the shoes with the Young Jeezy angry snowman face and the different bandana colors and Newport
uh-huh.
Pleasure shoes,
Uh-huh.
I had everybody in my pocket. And it's like the classroom management just kind of like just dissipated because
Right.
everybody was having fun and I had
Right.
everybody, I had
Right.
everybody. So when I was in grad school that first year, I ended up linking up with a group called the Public Allies. It's an AmeriCorps funded program.
Okay.
University of Delaware maintains a really like nationally successful and award-winning program in Wilmington. And Public Allies, high school grads, college grads, um, get placed with a local nonprofit, and you work for that nonprofit Monday through Thursday, and then every Friday you meet
Yeah.
with your fellow cohort and you go through this leadership development training. And I ended up teaming up with them and told them this idea that I had to like conduct sneaker workshops in the city of Wilmington.
Yeah.
And they immediately got me hooked up with a school on the east side, got me hooked up with different people who were organizing over there, and
Yeah.
we set up this community workshop every Wednesday and Friday for like a whole spring at Sarah Powell Academy, which is an alternative school on the east side of Wilmington.
Right.
And what that kind of planted a seed with me that I was like, wow, that was really fast. Like these people got me in touch with community like that.
Yeah.
And so that kind
Yeah.
of planted a seed. When I got out of grad school, I I thought to myself, well, if worst comes to worst and I have to stay in Delaware, it seems pretty easy to connect with people, like
Mhm.
maybe I can get involved in
Yeah.
like the nonprofit lane or something. And in the UDMFA program, uh, they encourage you to take a course outside of your discipline, like during your third semester.
Okay.
And I ended up taking a course in nonprofit leadership and governance in what is now called the Biden School. So it was
Okay.
a public policy school back then.
Right.
Now it's the Biden School. So
Right.
I took that coursework, and it just when I left the MFA program, my wife and I we had our son a week after my thesis show. I had what I didn't even realize at the time, but back in February of that year, I landed an interview at Boston University at the College Art Association conference, and I thought, hey, like everything's lining up. Like everybody told me my whole life that it was going to be impossible to be a professor. Here I am. I'm getting interviewed right
You're
now,
getting interviewed. Right. Yeah. It's happening.
thinking it's happening. And then I go down to Dallas and bomb the interview. And I start having symptoms for the first time of what ended up turning into my ulcerative colitis diagnosis.
Okay.
And then I had, my thesis show, my son was
Right.
born, and then the very next week I started working at the Delaware College of Art and Design. I got a job in the admissions office.
Okay.
Like in the time period from that interview with Boston University to the thesis show was also the market crash of 2008, and all those jobs like evaporated.
Yeah. Yeah. In thin
And I
air.
felt like I was just lucky to even be near a school. Although like working in the admissions office at the Delaware College of Art and Design, I used to tell people it felt like I'm a baker, and then I had to work the register at the bakery, and it was really frustrating for me.
I'm sure it
But
was.
it
Right.
was also what was really great is that it got me back into high school art rooms.
Yep.
And I think my prior experience as a teacher, I was able to like get into some rooms very easily.
Yep.
And the whole time I kind of went about that kind of recruitment job, I knew that, hey, like it's not going to be forever, but I am such a champion, always have been, always will be, to like encourage people to pursue their dreams,
Yeah.
like pursue what they want to pursue, but
Right.
also like, preach the gospel of there's 1,000 ways to get there, you
Yes.
know? And so I would go into these classrooms and
Yes.
instead of giving a like hardcore like sales pitch for DCAD, I would give a presentation on how to like present your portfolio. And then I would talk about our program, but like, when it was always a soft sell.
Right.
So that
Right.
was that was a cool job, but it like really introduced me to Wilmington. It introduced me to downtown. The whole time I was at the University of Delaware, I would drive over Wilmington, on my way to Philly or New York. Like
Right.
you didn't stop here, you didn't stay here,
It's like drive over country. It's like flyover country is drive over country, right?
big time. And so I had a friend of mine who was an undergrad at the time who lived in Wilmington who used to hold house shows, and I did a show at his place in this neighborhood called Cool Spring.
Okay.
And like now, a big cluster of my friends live there. There's all kinds of cool stuff going on there. But I remember having a show at his place and thinking to myself, you know what? Like, if we stay here, like, I could like be the contemporary art scene, like overnight.
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could create it. And like that's like, what I'm hearing your story, like everything is always like pulling you back to this thing, right? Like, like community empowerment, like encouraging individuals to pursue art and their lives in whatever way they want or can, and then landing, in your friends' house shows in Cool Springs, right? And then having that realization that there's so much that I can do here,
Mhm.
right? Is just like, come on, like stop trying to do all these other things and like just like give it up and say you're a Wilmington person, right?
Well, and then too, it's like the thing that was really cool. I mean, the Delaware College of Art and Design is in this like Art Deco building that used to be like our power company. And
Right.
the building itself is gorgeous. And our founding president, Jim Leckie, I always I forget the Hotel Budapest. That
Uh-huh.
movie. I always
Yeah.
like I always think of like that movie makes me think of DCAD so much because Jim Leckie is this like the guy had like such style and grace and was so smooth. And he reminded me of like the maitre d' or the host in that film,
Yeah. Yeah.
Gustav H or something like that. So like the place is also kind of like falling apart. And
Yeah.
it's like we got this old Art Deco building in Wilmington. It's like it can be really hard to convince people to like spend 2 years of school in Wilmington and then like
Right.
other places. And
Right.
so, but the thing is like that job, just like I really fell in love with the architecture of the building and just being in a city, even though it was a small city and it's little, at least like I was scratching that itch of being in a town, and it was just so much fun just walking up and down the streets and checking out new buildings. And the other great thing about an entry level admissions job is that I would probably be able to get everything done, by lunch.
Right.
And maybe I'll take a long lunch. Maybe I'll get lost. Maybe I'll
Right.
walk around someplace. And I started organizing my friends and created this little kind of cooperative called New Wilmington Art Association. And we were putting on shows in vacant properties throughout downtown. And I just took this one class from what's now the Biden School, and at least I like sounded like I knew what I was talking about. Like I had all
Sure.
the buzz term for like nonprofit leadership and development.
Exactly. Exactly.
We had a lot of fun organizing shows in those spaces. But what organizing those shows did was really kind of like put me on like a little contemporary art scene. Being affiliated with the college was really easy to open up a lot of doors.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to meet this really cool guy. His name's Chris White. He was the executive director of Community Legal Aid Society, and he was the board president of this community development corporation called Shipley Village CDC. And
Okay.
they were in the process of demoing a building and turning it into an artist live workspace. And when Jim Leckie, our president of DCAD, was getting ready to retire, he had me take his seat on this board
Okay.
and told me that, like, years ago when he came here to become president, he joined this board. And finally, all these years later, they're getting ready to like advance this project, all the work that you've been doing in the community. This building really needs that kind of connection and plug. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jim left, I took Jim's seat, and things just couldn't happen fast enough. Like as soon as I joined that board, like, the construction of this project started right off the bat.
That's awesome.
I had no kind of appreciation for the fact that the board was formed in 1998 when I graduated from high school. It like took a long time to get to this point.
Yeah.
For me, it just seemed like everything was just happening real quick.
Yep.
And so to be a part of this, like, organizing around this artist live workspace, it was a lot of fun. And we were already kind of like thinking about the second, third, and fourth building. And 3 days before the building opened, Chris White was tragically killed in a hit and run car accident.
Oh my God.
Leaving a planning meeting from our building and walking up Shipley Street to his office at 10th and Shipley, a community service building. And so, the great thing about working with Chris is that he did 90% of the work, and the bad thing is that he did 90% of the work.
Right.
On this project, I was the guy who was doing like 10% of the art stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then found myself in short order the new board chair of
Wow.
what is now called the Chris White Community Development Corporation.
Wow.
One of our first tenants was a guy named Alan Conover. And, our artist preference policy was very lax. Like artists, we had to define it very broadly. And Alan got in there. He was a DJ.
Okay.
His day job was the director of Delaware's like very first peer-run drop-in center.
Okay. Wow.
It was right down the street from Shipley Lofts and Chris White Gallery. So we're on Shipley Street. There's the 700 block of Shipley Street. Then on the 600 block, there's Planned Parenthood, and then there was the Rick Van Story Resource Center, a parking lot, and then right across the street is Delaware College of Art and Design. And so through this guy living in our building, I got to learn about this kind of like mental health drop-in space. And being in relationship with him, if you're in relationship with me, really quickly, you'll find out that I don't drink. And then you'll find out why I don't drink.
Right.
And then we'll kind of go from there. Well, when I tell Alan my story, when he figures out my story, he was like, well, do you know that the state of Delaware just got sued by the Department of Justice for warehousing people in the state hospital?
Wow.
And as a part of this lawsuit and settlement agreement, they're looking to establish more peer-run centers. And there's actually an idea out there to have a peer-run center organized around the arts. And Alan Conover said to me, he was like, they have no idea
what they're doing.
I'm like, they put this RFP together because Kevin Ann Huckshorn, who is the director of the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, who was brought in specifically to oversee this very complicated settlement agreement. One of her nurses that she brought with her to train up all the peers in Delaware is this woman named Gail Bluebird, who
Okay.
historically in the survivor movement is like a
Right.
big arts figure.
Yep.
And she's like responsible for bringing in like art spaces into a lot of hospital settings. But Gail, well, she'll refer to herself often as Bluebird, also is like very engaged with the arts as a site of advocacy and
Mhm.
protest. And she was one of the people that like sat in on Governor Brown's office in California way back in the day.
Right.
And what was so cool is as I started doing the research around this, I was just so excited because it became so clear that this was just like this was my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And a good
Yeah.
friend of mine and mentor in Wilmington, Barry Schlecker, who's this older guy. He used to run a networking company. He runs our Brandywine Festival of the Arts. He used to
Yep.
run the film festival, and he's just the funniest guy ever. You know, it's like if I meet somebody who's very reverent and makes me laugh all the time, I will be like attached to them forever.
Uh-huh.
And so Barry was kind of like my like Wilmington Sherpa because I would have breakfast with him and he's a natural networker and he'd always tell me like who I need to call, who I need to talk to. And when I started talking to him about this opportunity, I knew that he had a really extensive outsider art collection. And he got a lot of his stuff by supporting a lot of these progressive studios and programs. And he's
Right.
a huge fan of creative growth in Oakland.
Right.
And so when I started, doing the research for a kind of drop-in behavioral health arts center, and this request for proposals that I was looking at was really generic, um, I knew that I would be able to create kind of like the behavioral health version of creative growth, and that this huge legacy of working with people on the developmental disability spectrum, like
Right.
room to widen this out, and
Right.
create a really inclusive environment. And so my proposal I put together. I went in and, they immediately hired me.
Wow.
Like, yeah, you got it, and here it is. And so early on, they initially had us co-locate with the Rick Van Story Research Source Center. And so I spent the first months um, shadowing Alan in his program. And I knew right off the bat that we wouldn't be able to co-locate. But
Right.
as I was working on that plan, I accepted the contract like in July, and then we officially opened our doors in December
Okay.
of 2011. So this is our 10-year anniversary,
Right.
and this December will be 10 years that our doors have been open. But right now it's like 10-year anniversary of me being under contract with the state for this.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
early on, I mean, once we kind of, Alan ended up finding a different program and then got a different fiscal agent and moved, and I ended up
Mhm.
staying in the building.
Okay.
And so for me, it was really, it was a real trip. I feel like I come from a long line of kind of like hardworking Irishmen who are like constantly under the grip of fear that they will lose their jobs
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
high
man. Right
anxiety.
here with you.
High anxiety is the medium that we all live in, and
Yeah.
our family. And for me, like what really like the double-edged sword of Chris White's death, and what so many people didn't know about is that the week before, Chris and I were in a meeting with the United Way, where we were just getting turned down for a large grant that would have hired me as the liaison for Shipley Lofts, and I would have like managed the gallery, and I would have
Mhm.
been the art
Mhm.
guy there. And when we didn't get the funding, Chris was a guy that really wore the world with a loose fitting shirt, really at ease almost all
Mhm.
the time. But he was also a real tenacious fighter.
Mhm.
And he said to me, he's like, Michael, don't sweat it. He was like, we will get this. We will get this. Is too good of an idea. We will get this funded. Like, don't fucking
Don't
worry.
worry about it. Yeah.
Next week he's dead.
Wow. Oh my
And
god. And you're probably like, "What the hell?"
yeah, and it really the thing that was also really hard for me early on is that, like, I really love this guy, and there's so much grief there, but then it was also wrapped up in this grief of, like, my career and the opportunities, and, am I gonna be able to, like, recreate these scenarios? And then we
Right.
built this whole fucking building to run, and all
Yeah.
going on. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to organize a tenants association where I meet Alan Conover, and then it was just one of those things where, I don't know, my career has always benefited from being in the right place at the right time, from, like, landing that the high school art job,
For
meeting Michael
sure.
Faulkner, working with the, Jim Leckie at DCAT and meeting Chris White. And it just seemed like such a trip, years later, when I'm literally running a program that would have blew Chris White's mind.
Yeah.
And the big problem that I had when we were organizing for the rent up of Shipley Lofts is that through Chris's work, I started really seeing just how dire housing is, and just like our desperate need for more housing. And here, Chris White and his work through community legal aid was a big
Mhm.
advocate, and he was a leading figure in helping, like, mobile homeowners associations, like, keep their property,
Right.
all this kind of stuff. And so, it does feel like a kind of a kismet thing that I was just in the right place and needed to be there. But also too, it felt like Chris never left. Like, he was really, I
It
feel like,
was really
hand there. And he's also he was also, like, a crazy practical jokester. Like, he would always, like, pull practical jokes on people. And he grew up a minister's son out, like, on Cape Cod, and his brother told me this story, like, at his funeral, that he and Chris would work this gas station during the summer, and this gas station was, like, right at the beginning of the Cape.
okay.
People would drive in and ask them for directions how to get to Cape Cod,
Okay.
and Chris would give them really, like, enthusiastic, detailed directions inland. It was, like, the funniest thing ever. Well, like, every once in a while when, like, the shit is really hitting the fan at the Creative Vision Factory, I always, like, think, Chris is somewhere there,
Yeah.
and to just kinda trust this. We're just trying to do good stuff and cool stuff, and, like, let's just
Right.
trust the
Just keep
outcome.
trusting it. Yeah.
And so we've, the program itself, like I said, we're in our 10-year anniversary, and when we first started off, I mean, it was just a real trip, just, opening up our doors and having people come in. And thanks to that kind of, like, time period with Alan and at the Rick Van Story Resource Center, we already knew from his population that there's a lot of artists within that group. And just being in town,
Mhm.
organizing shows through New Wilmington Art Association, I had already shown one of the artists, Nakoma Frederick.
Okay.
And when I first met Nakoma would carry, like, all of his work on his person in like a backpack. And when I was shadowing at Rick Van Story Research Center, like, that first week, Nakoma came in with this big bag and a
Yep.
giant box of copy paper.
Yep.
He got in a fight with the guy who was working the front desk because he wanted to use the copy machine. And the guy was like, "Look, like, you can't make all those copies. Like, it costs a lot of money." And Nakoma was like, "What? I brought my own paper."
Right.
And
Right.
so I thought to myself, I was like, "You know what? I'm going to use this as an opportunity to kind of, like, lean in here and see what I can learn about this guy."
Right.
So I sat down with Nakoma. I was like, "Hey, can you show me what you want to make copies of?" And so he pulls out these, like, black folders. There's probably like 20 of them stacked together in this backpack. Opens it up, and I'm thinking, I look at the first one, and it's a handwritten newspaper article. And I'm thinking, okay, he wants to make, like, copies of a flyer.
Right.
Look through this folder, and it's like there's like 99 individual articles, all handwritten by him, to, like, look like a newspaper.
Wow.
Title is called Capital Freedom Recovery News. And the titles of some of these articles were like, the lower the rent, the more enemies you have, the commonality between a psychiatrist, a priest, and a whore, uh, all this stuff.
Wow.
And I'm reading all these articles, and
You don't know what you just opened up, right?
yeah, I said to him, I was like, "Look, like, what did you want to make copies of?"
Yeah.
And he said, well, I wanted to make a backup copy. This is all in pen. And I wanted to have a backup copy of this because they often will get like rained on. And it's just like my mind at that point in time just blew wide open because
Yeah.
here I am, coming from my kind of art training, I'm looking
Yeah.
at these objects
Yeah.
and these things. Like if all was right in behavioral health in Wilmington,
Right.
you wouldn't have this 30-some-year-old guy walking the streets writing these articles that damn the health system. And it was this portal into his lived experience that was so
Definitely.
raw and so pure that in that moment I knew that all I needed to do with the eventual Creative Vision Factory was just to create a space for him to feel comfortable, to make work, and then just to shine a big light on it.
Yeah.
And like that's basically the story of the Creative Vision Factory. It's like,
Right.
meeting Nakoma and understanding the depth of his work
Right.
and understanding, the space and conditions that he would need, the community that he'd need,
Right.
the supports. And again, too, it's like that is the supports and community that you have in every single art room. Every single art room I've ever
Yes.
been in, from grade
Yes.
school all the way up, has been like that. It is a place to be with friends. And
Right.
when I was in grad school too, I was really interested in kind of organizing spaces, alternative spaces, but I was always thinking like galleries and shows and things of that nature. And there was this great show that I went to uh, right during the time I was working on my thesis show. It was called High Times, Hard Times, abstract painting from like the late '60s to mid
Okay.
'70s, and
Yep.
um, it had a really great catalog. And one of the essays in the catalog, there was this essay by the painter David Reed in this catalog, and he was talking about the Lower East Side of New York during this time period. And there's this little segment of this interview where he was talking to the jazz musician David Amram, and he said he was like, the reason why the Lower East Side had such a fusion of like mixture and forms and all this cool stuff is that it was the only place in Manhattan where artists where you could still live affordably,
Mm-hmm.
and if you were an artist, is like you had to hang out with your adolescent neighbors. And if you didn't practice hangoutology with your adolescent neighbors, it would
Anthology.
make you like a victim of like petty crime, theft. And if you didn't want to have your shit stolen, that you should like hang out with your adolescent neighbors and like make art with them.
Wow.
And that idea of hangoutology always kind of like stuck to me of like, you know
I
what,
love that.
it's like so important just to like just be in proximity, just to hang out, get to know people.
I love that.
It wasn't until like I started to like really move into this work, when I first came into, accepting the contract, my qualifier as peer was that, I didn't drink and use heroin anymore. Well, another kind of like secret of my recovery during that time period is like I never talked to a therapist ever. And here, like I used to joke around early on when I took this contract that maybe this contract would be my mental health intervention. And it's just like I just think that is so hilarious because like all these years later, it totally was.
Yes.
About it was about 4 years ago when I started to recognize that I was having a really hard time, like being in my office alone or having
Mhm.
my back to the crowd. Like the space can be so frenetic at times.
Right.
And leading into the COVID era, it took the COVID era and the state mandated shutdown for us to even have a pause to ask ourselves, like, holy shit, maybe 80, like having 80 people move through our space in a day is not a good thing.
Huh.
Like, when you when you come up with that tide over the years,
Right.
you lose sight of like when you became overwhelmed.
Right.
And our program is also situated in right in center city. And what we've seen over the past like 5 years is a ton of gentrification, of
Right.
like transitions and
Yeah. It's
errors that
changed so much down there, right?
yeah. We have a mayor who is the guy who like built our riverfront,
Right.
and now he's kind of bringing that development model to the rest of this, well, not to the rest of the city, only to the downtown business district.
Right.
We saw the closure of Rick Van Story Resource Center ended up getting closed.
Uh-huh.
We saw the closure of 40 beds at the Central YMCA, and all these
Really?
things
Wow.
making it harder and harder for our folks and see
Yes.
their social infrastructure systematically shut down. And so as that's happening, our population, our numbers are increasing.
Mhm.
Like early on when we were getting, training, when I was privy to, all the early training of the beginning of the settlement agreement, you talk and you'd hear about transferable trauma and you'd like, intellectually you'd be able to understand it. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
all the years later of so much pain and so much dysfunction playing out in front of us and just, following just the like the really it's almost like a, you know, just the complete like overwhelming experience of poverty in Wilmington.
Right.
I started to see the behavioral health side of things a lot differently. It seemed to me like, you know what, these are behaviors that are so predictable.
Right.
This is what happens when you have nothing and you're outside and you're constantly under threat.
Yeah.
So you might like somebody might call this severe and persistent mental illness. I think it's like this is severe and persistent poverty.
Yes.
And you know what? Like the other thing that I started to observe is the only time I ever saw any like really good outcomes with a lot of our regular folks was like always like after they got like windfalls of money or they were housed for like a month.
Right.
And it just became really clear to me. It's like, oh man,
See,
we got to figure out a way to like house everybody and give them money.
that's
You
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Mhm.
The hierarchy of needs. You have to have your basic needs, met before you can do anything else,
Mhm.
right? And otherwise, you're just falling apart.
Mhm.
It's not that you're mentally ill. I mean, some people, there definitely is illness, right? But for the most part, if your needs aren't met, you are just not able to function,
Yeah.
right? And all we do on the regular in our world or country or whatever it is just take away people's basic needs,
Yeah.
like for whatever
And,
reason.
and the big part for me that I got to witness is we take away their autonomy.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
we have a system that like measures your ability to comply, and it's like
Exactly.
what I love about like the art room and the environment that we've created in the Creative Vision Factory, and also what I love about the peer movement. We're not about complying. It's the
Right.
complete opposite of that.
Right.
That agency has like probably zero to do with falling in line.
Mhm.
It's about taking that step forward of like, saying, no, this is what I need. And this is what I need to do
Yes.
together with my friends.
Yes.
And with the support of my friends, it makes that load a lot less heavy from day to day. And what we've seen kind of like as I feel like my whole viewpoint on mental illness and substance abuse has really been radicalized thanks to this experience. But then too, it also made me realize that I could only go so far with a kind of like, really kind of like rigid Catholic old school AA that I learned from my mom. I feel like
Right.
that kept me dry and functional for a very long time. And
Mhm.
my own kind of like, you know, um, just my own motivations and my own work ethic and all of this other stuff I really had to like work through to really come to this place that I am today of really, understanding that if you're doing this type of work and you're not talking to somebody who only has your interest in mind at least every other week, you're not going to last long. Like it's
Right.
going to eat you alive.
Right.
And
Right.
and
You
then
need community, right?
seeing the definitely coming out of where we came out of too. There's always also too this kind of like lingering question of like, are we doing enough? Are we doing the job? Um, but then seeing how we've responded during COVID and the work that we did to get people into emergency shelters and to really be a piece of really highly functional social infrastructure for our population of people.
Right.
Just really, I've never had more belief in our model than I do coming out of this. And it's really the social infrastructure that the Creative Vision Factory supplies. I mean, you can't name a town or a city in this country that wouldn't need it.
Right. Oh, no, definitely. So, I mean, it's so much more than just, like, a place for people to come in and make art and be creative. It is their lifeline, really,
Mhm.
right? And you're supplying them with so many things that I think, we talked about at the beginning of our conversation of you and I in the art room, right? As students, kids, teens, and our art teachers like seeing potential in us and helping us along and giving us identity, or not giving us identity, but helping us discover our identity and name it,
Yeah.
autonomy. And you said, you kept mentioning a few minutes ago that like you were just in the right place at the right time, which probably that is the case. But it sounds to me like hearing your story, the parts that you've told me, it's like it was just set up for you to be doing what you're doing, like predestined. It sounds like you're like the right person with the right skills. And it sounds like the city of Wilmington is just so lucky to have you there. um I know. I'll send this
We're
to.
joking. We just did this like really cool coffee for a cause campaign with the Brandywine Coffee Roasters that supplies all of our local brouhahas.
Uh-huh.
It's a shame that we're still coming out of COVID because brouhaha is definitely like all throughout our central business district. But it's like a lot of that type would be so happy to like just move us under a bridge somewhere.
Right.
It was just so powerful to have Brandywine Coffee Roasters recognize us, recognize our model,
Yes.
recognize our history. And then too, I was joking with people this past week, our last week of the fundraiser, to make sure that you send your bag of coffee to Mayor Przicki and let him know what you think of us. But, yeah, and then too, it's like we're doing this project right now with the Winter Tour Museum,
Hmm.
and it's funny to me like how the PTSD kind of hits me these days. Like we're we're doing a collaboration with like the largest endowed cultural institution in Delaware.
All right.
Like my one of my best friends is literally our downtown like this Senate District 3 state senator,
Okay.
and I can still feel completely unsafe. Like still feel like we're good like the rug could be pulled out from us at any
At
moment.
any moment.
And then this kind of like hyper vigilance of partnerships and work. I always joke. A lot of friends of mine in housing advocacy will say, "Man, like the strategy, Michael, is so good, so on point." And I'll be like, "Yeah, thanks. It's a trauma response."
It's a trauma rate for sure. For sure. I went and we have a few minutes. We have a few minutes left, and I want to just hear a little bit about like how you see creativity, making art, making things, however it is, whatever it is that you make, can affect positively your life and your ability to thrive in the world, right?
Yeah,
You're working with people all the time that are coming in with all different kinds of needs, right? We put the label of all of these different things on them, but at the end of the day, they're just human beings with needs, and like we were just talking about. And they come in there and they have the ability to do and receive all the things that you were just talking about, but they also have the ability to like create and explore. And um, what do you see? How do you see them changing
mhm,
through the mechanism of being a maker?
yeah. I um I think then too this is born out of a lot of reflection. Like when I was in that Washington Lee high school art room, kind of realizing, hey, I was one of those kids that was in the art room 4 periods a day too.
Hmm.
What was going on? And
Yeah.
then looking back, it's like what was going on is like I needed that. And the way I worked then too, I've always worked very like kind of process based, very kind of labor intuitive stuff, and it was
Yeah.
all kind of like always working that way. I don't have to. I never draw. I can just jump right in. I can always
Yeah.
start and stop whenever. And
Yep.
I the other thing that I was really into when I was younger as well is baseball and hockey. And in athletics and in art, now I can look back and see, and this was such an effective and powerful treatment for my anxiety.
Hmm.
It just helped ground me, helps keep me centered, and what we see all the time, and we talk about all the time in the studio too, is when you're working, when you're in the act of doing or creating, it's really hard to be dwelling on that like really awful thing that just happened to you.
Right.
And it's also really hard to be like gripped with worry of the next awful thing that's going to happen. And so many times when we have people coming into the factory who are coming in, they're in crisis and they're completely gripped by fear,
Hmm.
completely gripped by like some horrible thing that's happened,
Right.
anticipating the next horrible thing that
Yep.
happened, and they're very rarely ever just here.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the first times I had a crew with me working on a project. We were back at Sarah Powell Academy making a memorial mosaic wall for one of their beloved guidance counselors who passed away.
Okay.
And I'm out there with a group of people. I think half the crew was living at the Sunday breakfast mission. It's like you know uh,
Right.
kind of a pretty rough crowd to be taking into a alternative school. And when we were when we were grouting and buffing, the principal kind of came out and she was just like, "Do you hear that?" And then we like got up from our work and we're like, "What?" It was like, "Nothing. You hear nothing." Like this whole group was like just so enmeshed in the work of kind of buffing this
Yeah.
wall,
They were 100%
just in it.
present in
Yeah.
it,
And
what
it's
they were
just like
doing.
that's the mindfulness, the present moment. That is the I feel like the magic of the doing and of the making.
Hmm.
And then being able to do that collectively with other people and then be able to like talk to them about stuff that you're
Right.
interested in, weird stuff that you don't talk to anybody else about.
Right.
Man, it's like you can do anything. You can like change the world.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's the culmination of what happens there, the collective experience too of just everybody that's there. It's like this is where the kind of like peer support social infrastructure is just so critical, is that you can't like anybody in the factory at any time, just the collective knowledge that they have of supporting infrastructures and how to survive in the city. It's just such a huge resource.
Right.
And so anybody who comes into that space, I mean, we have the ability to connect them with somebody that can help them, navigate their way down to the mission or to get from
Right.
point A to point B or to figure out how to do this or how to do that. And a
Right.
big part of our work has really been advocacy and helping people navigate their current services, but also understand what to demand from those services.
Hmm.
And so it's
Hmm.
like it's weird. Creative Vision Factory. I'm like you can't be in Delaware and not be in the politics.
Right.
It's all over. But my wife, her grandfather was a longtime state rep in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
She and her brother had a experience of working in his office doing constituent services. And it's like the Creative Vision Factory is like simultaneously this hangoutology place, but it's also probably like the premier place for constituent services if you're experiencing homelessness. And
Wow.
Senator Coon's office and his staff has just been so helpful with our folks this whole year, helping track down like missing stimulus payments and trying to
Right.
figure out what's going on with people. And those types of things are just like making government work for you, making, like giving you a role to civically engage in your community and be a part of it. That's how it works. And that's
Right.
also like how a democracy should work. And that's how like this whole thing should work. And it's like we spent this whole past pandemic year working with the Temple Collaborative of Community Participation that the state of Delaware contracted Temple to work with all of our peer centers.
Okay.
And I spent a big part of the year pissed off about that. Like, okay, we're in a pandemic, we're in the front lines of a housing crisis, and yeah, you're gonna like, of course, you're gonna like give the peer centers this added thing to do. We're all
Right.
resourced, we're all undervalued, and now you're gonna give us another job.
More so. Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense in an environment where we're all under lockdown. But that said, like the power of participating in your community like anyone else and getting to meet all the researchers at Temple. I mean, the research is tight and spot on. It's great.
Hmm.
I can question the state's timing about it all day long,
Right.
Coming out of this, that is the new Wilmington, the new America that we want to try to strive for and create.
Mhm.
One where you can participate, and for us and for our members, like recovery, to us looks like just like being a participant,
Yeah,
simply
wow.
engaging, getting out there and doing something. It's like I know the state and temple, they like to measure like, getting people involved in church, getting people involved in like, in Delaware, we have enough people where we're going to get them involved in housing advocacy. We're going to get them involved in voter registration drives. We're going to get
Yeah,
them involved in campaigns.
right.
This is like how collectively we can actually like
Push us
the
forward.
creativity and make a new infrastructure.
Mhm.
So that's the thing. I think that the Creative Vision Factory is going to be that kind of site where folks can find community, they can find a place to be, and but just like every high school art room that I've ever been in, they're sites of becoming. This is like where you become,
Yes.
and it's like you're not only belonging here, you're figuring out like who you are,
Who
what
you are.
you're into.
That's beautiful. So, how can people are there ways for people to support the work of the Creative Vision Factory? Or do you get all the stuff you need from the state? Or can people actually somehow be involved with walking alongside the folks that you serve and work with?
We're getting closer to that time period. We still are observing pretty strict COVID restrictions. We still have a large percentage of our population is unvaccinated,
Yeah,
even though 70% of Delaware adults 18 and older are at least have one shot in their arm.
right.
Well, we have always been working with that other 30%.
Right.
And and then too, I could do a whole podcast series on how that vaccine drive was completely ass backwards and started with the wrong people.
Right.
Again, it's again, we want to approach government and community like craftspeople.
Yeah.
Let's get cool
Yes.
at this. Let's try new things. Let's
Yeah.
keep striving.
Experiment, explore, try.
Because,
Yeah.
that's the thing about kind of like democracy and government in this country too. Is like I feel like we need to tap back into this. This is an idea. This is an
Mhm.
experiment. This is
Yes.
like a project.
Right.
And we have to bring people into this project
Yeah.
so they count as citizens and their
Mm,
concerns are centered. And
yeah.
it's like, if you don't know that there's people living under the bridge and there's people living in a bunch of abandoned apartments, you're just not going to know. And
Right.
like
Right.
the solutions to this have to be built out of being in proximity with this lived experience that's happening right in our city,
Yeah.
like right in this North American city. And what makes it so weird is our scale is so small. I can throw a baseball from our building into like third world living conditions, and it's right there. And it's all built off of these legacies of discrimination, housing discrimination, and zoning.
Yep.
And it's a fascinating a story about like city planning. And I feel like it's almost like we're like living in a real live movie.
Yes.
It's like I don't have to study like gentrification and
No, you're right there. You're in it.
yeah, we're making the history. And so I always had a problem with, how can I be working over here for Shipley Lofts and trying to figure out like how that I'm advocating for artist live workspace or artist preference. Like artist preference in housing is inherently a discriminatory tool that
Yeah.
now allows you to discriminate for the educated poor. And this is where I see Chris White in the designs.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
that was something I really wrestled with, and the answer all these years later rests in the Creative Vision Factory. You just make more artists. You just make everybody an artist. And
Yeah.
so we actually next week when we come back from the 4th of July, I have some friends of mine from the Home campaign that are going to be helping our members on Tuesday and Wednesday complete their application for a new artist preference development project in downtown called Quaker Arts.
Okay.
Quaker Arts is being 53 units of affordable housing over 3 buildings that used to be owned by one of our largest behavioral health service providers. And the original impulse for this project was to get those clients who are artists like living in new construction properties. But that leadership is now long gone.
Right.
And if we don't assist in getting our folks into this building, they will not get into this building. And so we're going to do a real full court press this summer, trying to assist everybody in the completion of their housing applications, try to get them in the front line. And
That's
that's
awesome.
what we've been able to do. Like we've had our, like Nakoma Frederick, he won a Division of the Arts Fellowship this year. It's his second fellowship. It comes with a $6,000 award, show at the Biggs Museum. And these things.
That first guy that you met, like with his wanting to photocopy, is now
Yeah.
doing all this. Yeah.
Yeah, he's now shown it with Fleischer Ullman Gallery like 3 times. Alex Baker from Fleischer Ullman curated him in a show in Melbourne, Australia, and it's like what's funny about this though too is like that kind of success in the arts, you can still have all that success and still have, economic precarity square at you in the face. But what's been so critical with our program and our population too is just like the social capital of like being recognized as an artist. The social capital of now, like for a lot of our artists too, of like they maybe never walked into the museum until they were shown there. Is when they felt safe enough that they could be
They could go in there.
And so their engagement in the arts has literally made the map of their city bigger. And now they know more people who recognize them as, oh, you're that artist, you're this person, you're that. So that's
just like partially like when you were in high school and your teacher said he's an artist, right? It solidified that and gave you the ability to do more things with your life, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So we have to wrap up tonight. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. You gave us so much to think about, and I really, really do value your time. So thank you. Everybody, this has been Michael Kalmbach and me. And for those of you who are new to the Bold Creatives Collective, make sure you go to boldcreativescollective.com. I think I have the little thing, you know how to read. There you go. You can put your email address in. You'll get a, oh, it's right there too. Put your email address in, you'll get a free download of 4 Steps to Grow Your Creative Life. It takes you through goals, realities, options, and ways forward in terms of pushing into your creativity and cultivating a life that is just that, creative. And it's those are 4 pillars that I use myself. This little download gets you started there. But hang out with us in the collective, invite your friends, and I have some more stuff coming down the pipeline. But Michael, thank you so much for hanging out. Everybody, I will see you later. Thank you so much. I'll see you, Michael. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.